Hello everyone, welcome back to the garden on a cold January morning, but the trees are absolutely full of birds singing away. That sun is slowly creeping up now and it's time to start thinking about the year ahead. Now I think more than ever it's a really exciting time for gardening. There's so many more new gardeners due to the events of the last couple of years. Houseplants are absolutely massive, that trend is definitely going to continue, and there's so many more people experimenting, growing new flowers and vegetables from seed in their gardens. So I think it's a really exciting time to be getting involved, but what's ahead for 2022? This video is about my predictions for the coming year, some trends, and there'll hopefully be something for everyone in this video, from hard landscaping through to gardening styles, colours, and the plants I think will be the top of everyone's shopping list for this year. So let's get on with it. I will be carrying out some exciting projects here in the garden this spring, new additions to the garden, changing some things around, both in terms of hard landscaping and exciting new planting. So if you want to see videos about those, as well as some interesting how to grow guides, then subscribe to my channel and you won't miss a single video. But anyway, I can't guarantee that these predictions for the coming year won't be heavily influenced by my own tropical garden interests, but still I think there's some surprises in there. So whether you're adding to your garden this year, changing things around for your summer display, or excitingly planning a whole new garden for this spring, there'll be something in this video for you. But before I talk about all the exciting plants I know you want in your gardens this year, I thought I'd talk more generally about the garden styles I think will be really big trends this year. And when I say trends, it's not something you have to follow. Gardening doesn't have to be about following fashions, doing what other people are doing, and it's certainly a hobby, a passion, a lifestyle that lets you put your own creative stamp on your space. But still, there's lots of interesting themes developing at the minute, and people really getting the most out of their outdoor spaces. The most colour, the most impact, the most enjoyment, and the most benefit for the whole world. If you can do all that using less resources and less of your time, then I think everyone's a winner. So hopefully there's some helpful trends. I know I consume probably far too much garden media and content for my own good, but still, there's lots of really interesting ideas out there, and I hope I pack a few of them into this video. The first garden style trend that I see really taking off this year, it's not a new one, it's something that's been slowly building up, and I definitely see that trend continuing. It's planting with a naturalistic style. Now, I appreciate the irony that I'm saying that while I'm stood in a garden full of palms and other exotics, but naturalistic planting, it doesn't have to be about the plants themselves. I think really it's more of a move away from formal bedding, straight lines, isolated specimen plants. I think we're going to see a sort of more looser approach to planting, and mixed borders are definitely going to be big. Also mixing styles together. So here in the garden, although I've got lots of palms, bamboos, tree ferns, plants from all around the world, it's about combining them, and it's something that definitely takes a certain eye and something that you improve over time. But I think really combining plants to create your own patch of paradise, your own bit of nature in your back garden, is something that's going to be really big this year. I'm not claiming to be an expert in naturalistic planting, but when you see a garden where it's done well, it really is striking. And it's something I want to keep developing here, adding new plants in, making tweaks to really give the garden more personality and give it more atmosphere. And I think really naturalistic planting is more about a move from straight lines, from formal bedding plants that are all the same height, to curved flowing borders, plants that are packed in, especially around patios, seating areas, and it's about using plants of all different sizes, all different structures, shapes, colours. It's about mixing them together to really create a garden full of your personality and your creativity. I think one really big positive from the last couple of years is just how many more people now appreciate the value of nature, being outside, what it can do for your mental well-being, and how it can add to your life in so many ways. So whilst you won't want to recreate a slice of nature authentically in your own garden, I think there's such a wide variety now of ornamental plants that let you create the same kind of look, the same kind of feeling, bring the same kind of benefits to wildlife, but still with so much more colour and impact through the seasons. And that leads on to a practical tip on how you can create this look in your garden, something that I think is going to be really big this year. It's plants with a long season of interest. I will talk about the exciting plants that I think everyone will want to have in the gardens this year very soon, but for now I want to talk about the plants that are good doers, as people want a garden that looks great for even longer, an outdoor space they can use from spring all the way through to autumn, maybe even winter too, and I think plants that deliver a lot for months on end are definitely going to be key to that. Plants like the one that I only started regrettably growing last year, Salvia Amistad. It's a plant you can very easily grow from plugs or cuttings from neighbours, maybe friends. It's a plant that you can put in your garden in spring that will grow very quickly, it'll develop, and it'll flower for months on end. So from just one very small plant, you're getting almost like a bush-shaped plant, absolutely covered in purple flowers. They bring so much colour, so much vibrancy to your garden, and they're great for wildlife too. So I think plants like that have definitely got a lot of functions, but deliver so much from such a small investment in terms of time, care and money, I think they're really going to surge in popularity. But as people want to use the gardens for more than just the summer months, it's not just flowering plants that are key. I think evergreens are going to continue to be absolutely huge this year, and I think some really useful evergreens that come from the exotic space are definitely going to surge in popularity too. So I'm thinking Fatsia japonica, some of the more variegated varieties of those. Scheffleras I think will be really big this year. Something that really brings elegance, that greenery through to your garden all the way through the year. And also, I think bamboos. Now, not necessarily the big running bamboos, but the fargesias, the clumping bamboos. I think there's so many great varieties now with beautifully coloured culms that just bring so much interest. They bring sound to your garden as the wind rustles through the leaves. You've got that visual movement in your garden. And also, they stay beautiful and they stay green all the way through the year. So I think plants like that add structure and interest to your garden, especially in small gardens. They're so valuable and something that I definitely think is going to be key this year. Whilst lawns in general are going out of fashion, getting smaller, getting cut less, having other plants and bulbs mixed in them, ornamental grasses are going to go the other way and absolutely take off. Yes, they are popular now, deservedly so, but I think that's definitely going to continue. From tall varieties like miscanthus that can absolutely dominate a space, bring so much structure, really helpful for vertical screening, adding backdrops to your garden, through to smaller varieties like the Cannas, the Japanese forest grass, which is very useful for smaller gardens, shady spots, and really creating a sort of bottom edge to a border. I think there's so many different varieties out there, and whilst they're not evergreen like the plants that I've just spoken about, if you leave them in winter, they look absolutely fantastic. Yes, they go brown, but with a frost on them, they bring so much structure and still create a garden that's absolutely packed full of life even in winter. But from those to something a little bit bigger, I think trees are certainly going to take off. I think people, well, they obviously know now the value of trees for your gardens, for our towns, and for the world in general. But I think small trees are going to be so important this year. Plants and trees that deliver a lot of impact and bring a lot of interest as the seasons change. I'm thinking cherry trees with their amazing bark in winter, beautiful leaves, amazing blossom in spring, and then autumn colour as well. They're certainly going to be big. And it's not just deciduous trees, I think eucalyptus as well. I've got a few here, and they're a plant that certainly has a bit of a reputation for growing too big, drinking all the water out of your garden, being unmanageable, but there's so many more amazing small varieties now. So I think those are going to be another key plant for this year that people will want to have in the gardens. But it's not just big plants, I think small plants will also be big too, if that makes sense. I think the smaller sedums, the smaller sort of succulents, as people want to create this naturalistic effect on a smaller scale, I think really it's about packing as many plants in as possible and using plants from the large ones right the way down to the small ones to create a garden packed with texture, packed with contrast, and really bring your own personality to it. You might think that this first point about naturalistic style of gardening has been a bit vague and general. I will be getting onto very specific plant and hard landscaping trends very soon. But first, one tip on how you can create this naturalistic style in your garden, and something that I think will be a key trend this year, is people buying multiples of plants. I think the days of going out, choosing one of this, one of that are probably over, and I think people will realise that the best way of creating a garden with real style, this real naturalistic vibe, is by having multiples. Obviously, not every garden can fit 3 or 5 trees in, but when it comes to the smaller plants, the grasses, whatever you might use as bedding to fill around it, the salvias, they're a great example, buy multiples. And if you have those spread through your garden, just having that colour flowing through your garden, that repetition of structure and shape, it really helps create a garden that looks like it's been designed professionally and keeps that interest going through the seasons. I don't need to have a crystal ball to make my next prediction, and that's that garden rooms are going to continue to be massive in 2022. Not just physical cabins or garden offices, I think they can be expensive, it's a bit of a niche market, and probably everyone who wants one has got one by now. But I'm talking about separate areas in your garden, primarily for the use of entertaining and actually enjoying. I think people are realising now that gardens, they're not just a maintenance or a chore, they're not just something you look at out your window, they're something you can enjoy being out in, and for more of the year than you might have thought. So whilst garden buildings are actually quite expensive, I think budget alternatives to that, maybe pergolas, seating areas that are away from the house, decking perhaps made of sleepers, screens around it, tall plants, bamboos used to fence the areas off. I think those kind of styles are definitely going to be a big thing this year. And as well as that, I think maybe roof structures to enable people to be able to enjoy the garden, even if it is raining, they're certainly going to be a key way that people get the most out of the gardens this year. And now for the part of the video that a lot of my regular viewers have probably been waiting for. I think that growing a tropical style garden here in the UK is going to continue to grow in popularity. It's going to be absolutely massive this year, and for good reason too. If you think about it, if you're a young person moving to a new build, you want to put your own stamp on that garden, you want something that's vibrant, modern, full of colour. If you're a new gardener, you want plants that grow quickly to give you a lot of instant impact in just the first season. And tropical style gardening, it's the answer to all that and so much more. When it comes to plants, I think there's so many exotics like the Musabaju bananas and Cannas that you've already seen are more mainstream now. You can get them in all kinds of different shops. I think that trend's definitely going to continue. But with more niche exotics, I think now they're going to be more widely available at more garden centres, and people want to have a slice of that tropical paradise in their own garden at home. I just thought I'd show you this section of garden down here to give a few examples of plants that I certainly think are going to take off this year. Plants that were popular last year, but I think this year it's going to go absolutely off the scale. Bear in mind, this is a North Lincolnshire garden in early January, so even in the depths of winter, you can create a tropical paradise garden absolutely packed full of structure and colour. So to give you an example of a few of the plants I think will really take off this year, Tetrapanax. It's a fantastic plant. It was hard to get hold of last year, and I think this year there's going to be even more people after one, and for good reason too. It's an amazing plant, and you grow it primarily for those massive summer leaves. It's a plant that can be deciduous in a cold winter. You can see the leaves have started to blacken here, but in summer those leaves can get to over 1.5 meters across. Certainly 1 meter on most plants anyway. So it's a plant that certainly delivers fast growing impact, and it's a plant that if you have it in your garden, everyone will want to know exactly what it is. Moving on from that through to the plant over there, that's a Schefflera taiwaniana. They're an evergreen plant, a very graceful plant. They can be grown in containers, and they also can grow in shady spots in the garden. So they're a helpful plant for lots of tricky spots. But I think the main reason for the popularity is that those as a plant really recreate that houseplant look outside. So for all the people who are newly interested in houseplants, you can still create that kind of elegance in your garden at home. And following that, we've got another plant at the back there. Yes, you might realise by now how expensive variegated houseplants are. The monsteras, everything like that, they cost silly amounts of money. Using plants like Fatsia japonica spider's web, you can get that same kind of look, but they're also tough enough to grow outside in pretty much all UK gardens. So those are just a few examples of plants that I think are going to absolutely surge in popularity this year. Two more plants that again come from the exotic garden niche that I think are going to be absolutely massive this year. They both look very different, but they're both a very easy way of creating a tropical effect without any extra care and without any winter worries. Firstly, Trachycarpus palms. This is a waggy or Wagnerianus. You can tell by these really stiff leaves. It's a fantastic plant, very wind resistant, very frost hardy, and it's such an easy plant to grow. You can get Petunias, which has got this same kind of look, but even bigger leaves. It's an absolutely fantastic plant and a very quick grower too. They're both plants that you can buy in small sizes. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money, but they will develop nicely, and after just a couple of years in the ground, they'll start to grow up and give some real tropical impact in your garden. And the other plant is Colocasia Pink China. You might have heard of it, and it's certainly been a big plant in exotic garden circles because it delivers the big leaves that really sort of emphasise that jungle kind of look in your garden, but it does that whilst being winter hardy. So it dies down under the ground, but in spring it'll come back up, and in summer and autumn it'll have these amazing big leaves that really create that sort of jungle exotic vibe in your garden. So those are two more groups of plants or specific plants that I think will be even bigger this year than they were in 2021. Hopefully that last little section has encouraged you to add a tropical vibe to your garden this year, and if you're interested, check out my channel. I'll put a link in the description to a few really helpful videos, but there's so many other videos on there, how to grow guides, full care guides on a lot of these amazing exotic plants, from the Scheffleras through to the Tetrapanax, the Trachycarpus palms, and then bamboos and tree ferns as well. Honestly, creating a lush garden full of tropical appeal and that real holiday vibe, it's certainly achievable, and it's a lot easier than you might think. From bold purple cordylines through to the bright green zingy tree fern fronds, I've really tried to create a colourful garden here that looks great even in the depths of winter. And I think for 2022, bright bold colours are certainly going to be the way to go. Over the last few years, we've seen a rise in the popularity of dahlias with a really bright, bold colours. I'm thinking reds, oranges, yellows, everything like that. And I think they'll be joined with cannas and some older favourites like petunias will certainly be making a comeback. But when it comes to colours, I think that purple is going to be absolutely key. Purple as a colour, it combines the vibrancy of some of the other bright colours with a sort of richness and depth that only it can provide. And there's so many great purple plants out there. Again, I'm looking back to the Salvia Amistad as a plant that delivers so much purple vibrancy and impact for absolutely months of the year. And there's also a lot of great purple foliage plants too. So I think that colour is certainly going to be key in a lot of people's gardens this year. And one tip, if you want to create a garden that looks really well designed, a very stylish space, whatever the size, is to focus on maybe one or two real key colours. And probably the easiest way to think of it is, if you had a room to decorate inside, if you had one feature wall, that's really a great way of showing your own creativity and personality. But if you painted every single wall a different colour, it wouldn't look quite as stylish, it wouldn't look quite as classy. So definitely if you focus on just one main theme colour, repeat that through your garden, you create a lovely feel of a garden that's well designed, tied together, cohesive, and it'll have real visual impact. I think that the hard landscaping and garden industries are going to continue to develop and grow this year, as so many people now realise the importance of investing in your gardens and outdoor spaces. They're no longer just spaces for a lawn with a few token plants around. You can have garden rooms, garden spaces for you to enjoy with friends, family, or just relax by yourself. And in terms of colours, I think we're moving away now from the grey fences to probably going both ends of the spectrum. We're going to go for black fences. I think it's been a bit of a secret in the exotic garden community that black fences really show off bright sculptural or bold plants. I think that trend's going to go more mainstream. And then I think it's also going to go the other way too. So really bright, really bold and really colourful pots, planters, seats, all the sort of accessories like that. So I think we're going to have gardens that are really stylish, really modern looking, using a mixture of blacks and then bright colours too. And when it comes to materials, I think we're going to see a similar sort of contradiction or juxtaposition between older materials and the new. So I think we're going to see traditional materials like stone used more and more. As the price of timber goes up, suddenly putting a patio down doesn't seem as expensive comparatively. So I think it'd be a mixture of really old weathered stone and then the newer porcelain style tiles too. They'll be really popular. And when it comes to screens and things like that, I think that Corten steel, like this one here, again, that's going to be really popular. It's got an aged, weathered look to it. Yes, it's already popular, but I think it's a trend that's certainly going to continue in 2022. And just to really go with that, to absolutely contrast it, I think that bright, modern steel, things like water blades, water features, they're also going to be key in a lot of people's gardens too. So I think whatever the look of the garden you want to create, there's definitely the hard landscaping materials out there to give it a traditional, modern, clean or contemporary edge. It's not just about potentially expensive hard landscaping and exotic specimen plants. I think this year the themes of recycling, reusing and cost saving will be more important than ever. That could mean creating your own individual garden art from repurposed household objects. It could mean creating your own planters, your own pots. Whatever it is, I think that reusing items in your garden is certainly going to be big. And I think the other main cost saving and sustainability trend that's going to continue to grow is growing from seed. So many people have realised over the last couple of years just how rewarding it is to grow plants, whether inside or outdoors, and how amazing it is to have your own outdoor space, just how much it gives back to you. And I think probably the best element of gardening, in terms of not spending a lot of money, but getting such a rewarding experience out of it, is growing from seed. And this year, with all the sustainability issues going on, the rising costs of bringing plants into the country, the issues with peat going peat-free, as well as the various import restrictions, the price of plants is going up. And adding to that, the fact that bedding plants is certainly looking a bit old-fashioned now. I think the idea of buying loads of plants in spring just to throw them out at the end of autumn, that idea, that's dying away. But one way that you can create something like that without spending a lot that is more sustainable is growing from seed. There's so many easy flowers to grow from seed, but many people's first attempts are with vegetables. And I think whilst so many people are taking the first steps into the gardens and gardening using vegetables, I think this year, more than ever, we're going to see vegetables mixed into conventional planting schemes. So yes, there's going to be people with raised beds who just grow vegetables, but I think more people are realising that you can combine the productive with the ornamental and have a garden that's absolutely packed full of leaves and fruits and vegetables. You can really have something that ticks all those boxes. And last year here in the garden, I grew sweet corn, marrows, and a few other salad crops. I think the leaves helped add to the garden. They're great filler plants while my summer tropical plants developed. And really, it's another element to the garden. So I think this year we're going to see more people mixing the vegetables into sort of mixed planting with cottage style plants, with tropical style plants. I think it's a theme that's definitely going to continue. A vegetable garden doesn't have to be a boring thing to look at or just bare earth for most of the year. And likewise, a garden full of flowers doesn't have to stop at purely ornamental value. So I think that's definitely a hybrid that's going to certainly develop this year. It's no secret that growing houseplants has been really trendy for a good few years now, and I think that's definitely set to continue. The groups of plants that have become really popular, cacti and succulents, foliage plants like Kentia palms and monstera, I think those will continue to be really popular, and certain species and varieties will continue to be sold for ridiculous prices. But I think more people realise that you can create a similar effect outside using evergreens. Again, like I showed you earlier, Fatsia japonica with its glossy leaves, Schefflera taiwaniana. There's loads of really tough, hardy and evergreen plants that allow you to create that houseplant look, that glossy elegance outside in your gardens all year round too. And there's also varieties that are a little bit more on the edge, like here, Schefflera macrophylla, which has definitely got that houseplant look to it. So I think that's something that's going to be key this year. More and more people get out into gardens and realising that planting up a garden, it's not a mystical art, it's not a science. You can just plant up a garden how you'd arrange pots at home. And I think that pots, again, will be a really key thing in 2022. People having displays of containers, but not necessarily planted up with bedding like they would traditionally be. I think more cacti and succulents will find their way into them, as well as plants that actually go out into your garden all year round. Inspired by exotic gardeners like Will Giles, I've tried to introduce a lot of houseplants into the summer garden here. So I think it's a bit of a realisation that whilst plants might not survive a UK winter, you can use them to decorate your garden, whether in containers or temporarily plant them into the borders to really create a garden with an exotic, lush vibe for the summer months. And I think that's going to be a trend for this year. Individuals like Jimmy Blake over at Huntingbrook Gardens, he uses a lot of cacti in his garden and it really sets it off. It creates a real talking point. He contrasts that with other more traditional foliage. Here in the garden, I've got a few cacti, but then I also use other plants like spider plants as sort of bedding to really create that lush tropical vibe in a UK summer. From unexpected plants that bring a holiday vibe to your summer garden, I think another big trend is going to be for tough, resilient plants. Plants that can cope with the worst of the UK weather, but still don't need a lot in terms of care and resources. Obviously, sustainability is massive, and you don't need me to tell you that we should all use less petrol in the gardens, have smaller lawns, cut them less often, recycle plastics more and use less peat. All those things are so important. But I think another big one is that the plants that you put into your garden, if you want them to be there long term, they need to be tough plants that can cope with the conditions and likely conditions that might come up where you are. So I think areas that traditionally have dry spells in summer, that's maybe going to be emphasised more now and become longer drought periods. And likewise, flash flooding, torrential rain, maybe even deeper cold spells might be possible in the winter too. So I think tougher plants are more important than ever. And whilst growing natives is certainly important, I think if you live in the drier areas, a look towards more Mediterranean or arid planting is certainly key this year. Plants like phormiums, cordylines, Mediterranean plants like dwarf fan palms. There's so many amazing plants that are really sculptural, really architectural, but still don't take anything really in terms of additional care, and they won't need additional water. So I think the key is really right plant, right place. That's always been important, but as climate change really has more effects on us, that's certainly going to be key. Choosing plants that can survive in your garden long term and plants that will thrive, not just survive in those conditions. One thing that I will add, I don't just see this as a restriction. I see it as an opportunity for exciting planting. Just because something's tough and doesn't take a lot of care doesn't mean it can't give you so much back. Plants like the phormium that I mentioned, euphorbia, they're colourful plants that bring a lot of interest all the way through the year. There's more unusual choices like Tetrapanax that I think will be really big this year, along with other staples of the garden, Hylotelephium and sedums. I think there's lots of tough plants out there that are great in terms of providing colour, architectural interest in your garden, but also great for the wildlife too. It's just got really dark now. Hopefully it's not about to rain. But anyway, that's my garden predictions for 2022 and beyond. In terms of must-have plants, hard landscaping themes, colour schemes and gardening styles. But I want to end with a hope rather than a direct prediction. A mindset rather than a practical garden change. I honestly think that things are changing for the better, and that we're realising more and more that gardens, they're not just something pretty to look at, they're something that can be so much more than that. And when I say garden, I think of a place filled with plants. A garden shouldn't just be about hard landscaping. And the days of a garden being a resource heavy sort of dump for pesticides and all the chemicals under the sun, that shouldn't be the case too. So I think more and more we need a tough garden that's its own ecosystem and something that gives back to the rest of the planet as well as us. There's no reason why, even here in a garden full of exotics from around the world, you can't have plants for the pollinators, the bees, the butterflies. There's so many plants out there that look ornamental, but also just to have great benefits to the world too. So that's something that I'm going to do a few videos about this spring, how I bring wildlife of different kinds into the garden here. But it's not just about the cliche pollinators, it's about seeing a garden as a slice of the world, your own piece of the planet. It's about creating that food web, a habitat, something that not only looks good, but it's a great place for you and the wildlife that inhabits your part of the world too. So thanks a lot for watching this video. If you've got any particular predictions for 2022, there can be a particular plant, a certain theme, or just something that you want to happen, then leave a comment below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.